All right, can everyone hear me okay? Yep, great. So let's go ahead and get started. I do also realize that this session is one of the live streaming sessions of the week. So you have the privilege of not only just hearing me, but so do people as well online that are participating. So a little bit of a shout out if my wife and my daughters are listening, hope they are. So I want to say hi to them. So let's get started and talk about OAC. But before we do that, I want to do a little introduction of myself. So I'm Gary Adashek, Senior Manager over at GE Digital, and responsible for the Data Solution Architects team. So for what you're not familiar part of that title, it's really integrations. So we are responsible for moving data and data solutions, and I hated the word integrations. I couldn't stand it. People just use integrations all over the place. So we are solution architects for data. So let's do a little bit of introductions. So please, at the end, fill out your evaluations. I like high marks. I think all of you would as well if you're presenting. And so let's talk a little bit about, I said I worked at GE, a part of GE Digital. GE has a number of large business units of aviation, healthcare, transportation, lighting, and so on. We actually produce machines and provide solutions to people all over the world globally, saving lives on a daily basis with the healthcare unit and the solutions and equipment that they're providing and producing. We actually supply approximately 30% of the world's power with our power unit and business unit. And every 2 seconds, an airplane is powered by a GE engine, takes off. So a lot of really neat things. I'm really proud to be able to say that I work at GE. I've been there for a little over 8 years. You can see the one that's a little bit more of that blackish gray. That's where I'm at. I'm in GE Digital, and we're in the IT function. We're a part of what we've created as an EPM shared service globally for GE. So we'll get into to see what we're doing at GE with OAC. Before we do that, some of the things as well of why I love working at GE. I have an amazing cast of crew of other GE presenters that have been here throughout the week. Very privileged and honored to be able to say that I work with them and they're presenting really, really great and creative things, a part of their work and a part of working at GE with me. So the other thing I want to also call out and recognize is that I am a part of the ACE program. The ACE program has 3 different levels or designations as part of the program, starting with ACE Associate and ACE Director. If you are interested, you can go ahead and potentially nominate yourself if you feel that you're qualified, or maybe you have a peer or a friend that you feel is qualified as well. You know, there is a nomination program and application for you to log in to go to check that out. So, with further ado, let's get to a little video I want to share with you as I try to navigate back to the screen on my side. There we go. So, as the video starts, what I want you to take notice of. So this video is actually refreshing every 3 seconds. It's actually got a combination of the category of American League and National League. Every single one of those bars in the chart is an individual player in baseball and the number of home runs they hit in that decade. So depending on the color and the size of that bar is how many home runs that person hit. And you've actually started in 1870 and you're going all the way through 2016. So you literally are looking at, in less than a minute, every single home run that was hit in Major League Baseball history. Congratulations. So when the video stops, this was put together by a cube that I loaded up in OAC with all of those players and the statistics and the data. It was also put together by using DV, with using actually a combination grid with 2 different visualization types. One, as you can see, was the bar, and the other one that you didn't necessarily see was the dimension player. So one was standard kind of quote out of the box, and the other one was a custom plugin that I also used to apply to this visualization. All right. So the resolution on this screen is a little tough to see, but you actually have on here, it should look like a tree, and you're starting with the node here, and this is the Expandable Tree plugin. This is a custom plugin as well. This one is one of my favorites. This is one of my favorite plugins, and the reason why it's one of my favorites and why this one for me is pretty special is because it doesn't require a measure. This plugin doesn't require a measure, this visualization. I can literally just take and drop my dimension or my hierarchy in here and just navigate throughout. Clicking, it's interactive, it expands the tree, the nodes, and I don't need a measure in here. In this case, this one actually, I believe, does have the measures on it at the end. It actually tells you these are the franchises in baseball history and the teams within that franchise. And then this one, I think I did as well, put on the home runs, so you could see the home runs that are associated for that team. Little side note, these are the actual two teams that were in the World Series last year, the LA Dodgers and the Houston Astros. And you can see LA had a number of teams within their franchise because they started in Brooklyn and so on. And Houston had a few less. So this is the actual visualization that we were just talking about. And we're going to play the video. And you can see I'm interacting with both of them. They're acting the same way. The only difference is this one on the left has the data. So you could see as I went through the nodes and I was expanding the tree to get to the proper place that I wanted to in that hierarchy, it actually has the data node element on it. The one on the other side is the exact same cube. It's the exact same dimension. It's the exact same data that's in there. And I didn't have to, there was no requirement for me to actually put that measure within the visualization. So some of the things for me is I want to just navigate and see what's in there. I want to see the hierarchy. For me, this was one that I felt was actually very powerful from an end user perspective because they could actually see the hierarchy. They didn't need to know about what's the proper point of view, how do I actually see valid data. I just want to see what's in there. What are the company codes that get aggregated up, consolidated? What are the cost centers that are in that structure? So that's why I like this one quite a bit. So before we get in, there's a little bit of Disney drama that I need to address. So I don't know, has anyone seen the news in the last about 7 to 10 days about the Inside Out movie? Anyone see this article that Disney's Pixar possibly was plagiarized? Nobody? I think I was following it because I was doing this presentation and I saw this come through my Google feed and I'm like, someone from Disney Parks is going to come and they're just going to escort me out because they're seeing it. So we're going to do this on The Incredibles today. Kidding. We'll still stick with Inside Out. We'll still do it in that theme. I don't think I have any issues with Disney at the moment. If I do, I'll have to call ODTUG and tell them to take them down and we'll put on more generic slides. So let's get into talking about Inside Out the movie, which is what this is based on, and we'll talk about possibly there was an actual real live Joy that came to visit us at ODTUG this year. So she was actually here at the conference in real life. That's actually Teal Sexton. So if you know Teal, she's actually the content lead on the EPM BI track. She was the track lead. And it was actually funny that she actually came. That's her actual hair just dyed blue. So let's talk about some of the emotions that we might see throughout this presentation. So the first one, we met the real life one, but this is Joy. Disgust. Hopefully Disgust does not join us too often. If she does, let's be careful. Sadness. So every once in a while there was some sadness. Anger. I really hope anger doesn't come out not real good. I like Oracle. I like working with the products. I hope anger doesn't come out that often. Fear. Every once in a while there is fear because it is a relatively new product. You're not sure what you're getting into. You don't know what kind of bugs might be out there or what you may encounter. And Bing Bong. Bing Bong is one of my favorites. Bing Bong is definitely one of my favorites. Nice, big, happy pink elephant. I think he's an elephant. All right, so let's set some of the groundwork of what is OAC. So OAC, Oracle Analytics Cloud. So if you were at the Sunday Symposium, you heard that from Gabby, it is OAC, Oracle Analytics Cloud. It is just that one thing. But that one thing actually consists potentially of a number of different things. OAC is essentially intended to be a single platform, as it says, to empower you as an organization to question, investigate, and interrogate your data through really any common device or environment. With that, OAC brings us a new user experience, a new user interface for Essbase, the one that we know and love. So this is the graphical user interface online on the web. It has the nice little pop icons that are up there. They're nice and bold and bright and colorful. And you can see that the way that the applications are displayed, that is relative positioning for where that shows up in the middle of the screen for your list of applications with your cubes. You see a number of different buttons that light up depending on what you're doing, navigating and clicking throughout the web. So if you actually did click on the application, you'd see other pop icons come and light up versus the cube. You'll see the outline light up. So within here, you're going to be able to see the applications, the outline, the jobs, the scripts. You'll be able to see the security and the settings. And then you also have some of the other things in here of the utilities and the templates and the Academy if you wanted to jump out and learn more about it in more depth and detail. So that's very joyful for me. So let's talk a little bit about the utilities. So the utilities looks like that little download, and you have the ability in here, which is a part of, I believe, .108 version at the minimum that you would need for OAC, to be able to download both the SmartView client as well as the Cube Designer extension. So the beautiful part of working with OAC, some of the feedback that we were giving to the product managers was, I love the fact that you put SmartView out there. I don't always necessarily want to try to search around, or yeah, Google search is okay and you can find it on Oracle. But if someone's actually going and having an OAC pod, let's just make it easy for them to just download it there from their instance. And the same thing with the Cube Designer. So there were some issues I know they were working on making the extensions easier to download. You could point it to a specific environment. Sometimes there were some conflicts and it didn't always work exactly right. And this is actually another nice way to be able to get both downloaded at the same time if you needed it standalone and you were having issues with that extension downloading. So let's talk about the templates as well. So the templates are what everybody kind of from the beginning of using Essbase and planning in ASO should recognize a number of these applications and the cubes that are there. So you've got demo basic, you've got sample basic, you've got ASO. You have all of the basic cubes or apps that are there and available. And the reason these are templates, because these are actual template workbooks. So the beautiful part about OAC is they actually give you a starter guide that you don't need to necessarily start from scratch. If you got the Essbase or planning shipped to you, these were a part of the shipment, a part of the installers. You could build those all on your own. This is actually a great way to do it without having to go through that if you were wanting to just purchase OAC, for instance, and you don't know Essbase, you don't know planning, you don't know ASO versus BSO. This is a great starting block. No pun intended. My humor will get better over time. At least I hope. All right, so let's talk about that extension that I was mentioning about earlier. So this is SmartView and the Cube Designer extension, both installed, both enabled. So when you have SmartView, you have the actual SmartView ribbon. And then when you have the extension, you get that extra now ribbon that says the Cube Designer. When you're in Cube Designer, this is really the look and feel of it. I'm a big fan of the nice big buttons. As I'm getting older, my sight and my vision's going, so I like to have the big buttons so I know what I'm doing, where I'm going. They're labeled nicely. This button that looks like a cube is the actual Cube Designer, and we'll get more into it. But again, let's start to pace ourselves here. So now we get to see the world from the inside out of OAC, Essbase, DV, and maybe a little bit of BI mixed in there. So you see the world from the inside out when you feel good, when you feel mad, when you feel sad. Never fear, they're all in your head. So don't worry, all the things we're talking about is only in my head. I've gone through some of the pains. I'm going to go through and show you and go through the Cube Designer. The Cube Designer is really a wizard. So it's a wizard that you can use both for the on-premise environment, technically, or the cloud. And I'll explain that in a little second here. So the how and the why. So a little bit of the how and the why, because I know that you may be a little bit fearful, is you can use this both for on-prem and cloud cubes in the sense that this actually could act as your cube architecture. How you're going to go and design and build the cube. You could build it from scratch. You could hand this to a finance end user and say, load it up with all your hierarchies. Okay, that sounds pretty easy. They could hand that back to a developer, a technician, an admin, whoever's actually doing the development, and they can now consume that, review it, and say, I see where you're going. Let's ask some questions. Let's go through the requirement session of, let's ask more detailed questions. So in the sense that this can be used for both on-prem and building the cube, designing the cube, but when you're actually going to deploy it, a little bit different story, okay? And we'll talk a little bit why. But this is the actual Cube Designer, the extension, and it has up on top cube settings, dimensions, data, calc. Those are the tabs within the designer. So when we get to the cube tab, so the cube tab is what you saw before. Again, you're going to enter in the typical things that you'd go through if you went into EAS and you did the right click and wanted to do a new cube. And you'd go in and you'd say, what's the application name? What's the cube name? And then here it's actually asking you right off the bat, what are all the dimensions that you want? So you literally go in and where it says add dimension, you go in and you type dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3. Actually give it real dimension names that you want. Every time you hit the enter or carriage return, it adds that dimension name into that box below. And now you're starting to build out your cube. I had a punny joke that it says dimensions, but in theory, it should say add dimension. A little bit of a conflict. So a question here that I've got for the audience. This is participation involved. So asking the audience, how many people have created a cube with only one dimension? Very good. One person. Maybe some Oracle people have, they're just not admitting it. So do you know what the challenges of building a one-dimensional cube are, aside from you're going to have a hard time loading data? No? So for me, being the SmartView guy, the one challenge I have is that it doesn't render in SmartView. And Shaji would attest to that. It doesn't render in SmartView because SmartView needs a recognizable grid. It needs a column and row, and if you have one dimension, you don't have a column and row, you just have a column or row. So a little bit of a trick question, but I would argue that you could, in theory, build a one-dimensional cube, either use EAS, navigate that, do some looking around. In theory, I guess you could use data visualization with the visualization that I saw, because it doesn't require data. And in theory, it should pick up the one dimension. So you should be able to build and deploy the cube and see it that way. So thank you for participating. Appreciate that. So let's get on to the next tab, which is the settings. So the settings is where you're going to go in there and you can tell it what alias table or tables that you want. Default is already there by default. And then you get to go into some of these different sections within that tab. So you're getting into properties. You're telling it what type of cube do you want. Do you want BSO? Do you want ASO? BSO is by default checked, so you're going to by default create a BSO cube. You have unique member names and aggregate missing values, creating blocks depending on the cube type. So you have a lot of things that are or should be familiar if you've come from other Essbase development environments. To continue on talking about the settings, because there are a number of different settings. If you've ever built an Essbase cube before, you know that there are a number of these settings that you could think through a part of your design. And dynamic time series is there and available if that is appropriate for you, month to date and quarter to date. You've got the attribute settings. For me, I typically try to just leave those alone. They work well just the way they are in that fashion. If you have a need to modify them, you have the ability there in those text boxes to modify and make changes as you see fit. And then you have the ability to add in the prefixing and suffixing and underscoring. And the other thing that I really found to be useful, especially for the data set that you saw earlier for the Major League Baseball statistics, was text lists. So adding text lists or text measures was actually really important for me because I wanted to be able to say, where was this person born? Or what was their weight? What was their height? What did they bat, left or right? You know, those kinds of things. I was adding those as text lists as I found it appropriate. In this case, the specific use case was, were they in the Hall of Fame? Yes, no, maybe. So that's where I'm adding those in. And you can do that from SmartView with the Cube Designer extension. The next one, so we talked about when you're going into the cube and you're telling it the application and the cube name, you're also providing it the list of dimension names. This is now where you get to do a little bit more detailed definition, a part of describing that dimension and what it's going to do, what some of the behavior is. So what is the dimension type? Is this your account dimension? Is this the time dimension? What type of dimension is it? And then what is the storage type? So is it stored? Is it sparse? What types of dimension quality properties are there? Build method. So I don't believe that this build method has changed. I believe you still only have the ability to build in the parent-child method. So if for some reason you were building in generational or level type scenarios, in here you're doing it in parent-child, and you'll see a little bit of why they're, you know, the development team has recommended in this fashion. When you actually get into the Cube Designer and you see some of that functionality, parent-child just seems to make the most logical sense. And then you have the way that you're going to actually now build up these dimensions or the cube and incrementally merging. The other thing here is you'll see just below that is a button called Update Generation Worksheet. So this isn't just naturally a part of the worksheet. You actually need to go build out your dimensions and the hierarchy structures for them. And then once that's done, you can actually come back here to the wizard, hit the button for Update Generation. And what that's going to do for you is actually provide you with a worksheet that now gives you your dimensions. It'll go through and it'll intelligently figure out how many generations you have in each of those dimensions. And then if you wanted even above that, a part of that worksheet, you can now provide that generation with a name. So a more logical name as now you're going to OAC, you're going into DV, and you're going to build some of these visualizations, you can drag on players generation 2 because that means more sense, you know, and makes more sense to you. Dimension build fields, so those are, I think we're going to get into those in a little bit more detail here in a second. So dimension build fields, so this is actually now as you're continually building out the dimensions and the members, and this is going to allow you to pick the storage type, what is the consolidation operator, what is the solve order if that's required. So that's a number of different properties, a part of building out those dimensions and those members. Formula we'll get to in a little bit down the road here in a few different slides. And then you can actually go dimension by dimension and tell it how many UDAs do I want for that dimension. None, 3, 5, however many. And then you can also tell it which is the appropriate alias table for that dimension as well here. It should show you the list of alias tables that are available. And then you would actually, as you pick that dimension, pick the appropriate alias table to be, quote, activated. not sure why sadness joined me here. I think it might have been the fact of the text lists, possibly, not having the ability to modify the text lists in the Cube Designer. So in talking with the product management team, they are aware that we have the ability to create the text list here from the Cube Designer the first time it brings you the worksheet, but there's not necessarily an ability in the versions that I was using at the time to be able to go onto the graphical user face online and modify and adjust the text list. So a little bit of sadness. All right, so the next tab on here. So the next tab on here is data. So this is where you have the ability of, you're going through, you're creating your cube, you're providing it the dimensionality, you're now actually going into those dimension worksheets and you're building out the cube. You actually have the ability to not only just build a cube, but load the data. And this is actually going to provide you with another separate sheet within your workbook. That's a data sheet now that you can use to load the data all in one shot, right from the Excel workbook. Okay. The thing to note here is that it's not needed, it's not required. So if you just felt that you wanted to build a cube, but you didn't want to load data right now, this is not a required sheet. It's optional. The other thing that I wanted to note on here, as you're building out this workbook and you're putting in the dimensions and you're doing all of that, as you go and you actually would want to put in the data sheet or the data itself, you will actually want the format or the syntax of the measure columns in that worksheet to look as this is reading. So you actually want it to be the measure.member name. And so in my example, in my cube, it was measure.pitching_W for wins, for the number of wins each pitcher had. That's the naming syntax that you want for the actual header of that data element. Okay. And so this is an actual example. So keeping honest, this is the actual data from Major League Baseball starting in 1871. That is the actual syntax that we're talking about in this example, so it may be a little hard to read. This is easier to read. So it actually does say measure.hr for number of home runs. So it is the measure.member name. So this is what the actual data sheet looks like within the workbook. And so it's providing the file name, data_batting, the rule name, so it's actually creating a rule file. The data load option here is being replaced, and then the actual data itself down below. Calc. So Calc is now the last tab within this wizard. Calc is going to actually add another sheet within the workbook to provide you with the ability to add in calculations as you need them, and it's just that, as you need them. Again, similar to data, this is not required. It's as needed. The other component that I wanted to talk about on this wizard, on this setup, is the three little buttons down on the bottom. So I brought them up top so that you could see them. To sheet, from sheet, and reset. Relatively straightforward on what that means, but I'll explain them. To sheet is once you're at a point where you feel that what you're going through in the wizard is what you now want to see within the Excel workbook, you can hit to sheet. And so now, start off with a blank Excel workbook, you literally go into the ribbon, you click on Cube Designer, this extension panel opens up. This is going to now allow you to send all of that information from this wizard panel into the workbook. Step by step, it's going to put in the sheet for the cube with the application, with the settings, with the dimensions, what type they are. It's going to go through and put all the dimensions in there, so now you can build out your hierarchies with everything in there, so on and so forth with data and calc if those were in there. Now, part of the beauty of this wizard is it has a from sheet. So let's say you decided to make a change to one of the dimensions or what type of dimension. If you hit from sheet, it's actually going to go into the workbook. It's going to take a look and analyze it and then pull that information back into this wizard. So it's actually smart for Smart View that it's actually going to go in, reach in, and grab it and pull it back. Now you can continue working in the wizard. When you're done, you can actually hit to sheet and send it back now the way that you want it. Reset, essentially reset is going to wipe the wizard clean. So no magic, it's all gone. Any questions so far? Okay. Files. So as we were going through, we were talking about the utilities, we were talking about the cube designer. Let's talk about the files that are in OAC. So as we were talking about building the cube, and we saw that we were going to be creating the cube, providing the dimensions, we're going to be potentially loading it up with data. One of the things that you saw in there was that it actually is providing in that Excel sheet the names for the rules, and this is where it's doing that. So you could see that it's creating a file for data, for your dimension or dimensions, your smart list, your outline. It's actually putting the workbook online for you. So you can see that data batting.rul for your rule file, .text for your data. You're going to have your .text for your dimension, so it's going to do dim underscore in your dimension name. You have a text file in there for your smart lists. You have your OTL file, so no worries, in the cloud it's still an OTL file. And then you have one that is .xlsx. That is your workbook when you were to go and hit deploy. It loads it up, it puts it into your OAC, Essbase, and it's stored there for you. The note that I have here. The note is that the Excel file online, the one that you see here in OAC, is not dynamically updated. That's a one-time activity. So the way that I like to think about that is that it's an as-is copy the moment that you hit create, deploy, the first time. So if you were to go back and you were to go to the online web and you were to say, years, that should be my time. I'm going to go up. It's easier for me to just log in online, make that change, open up and edit the outline, hit save. It doesn't go back into that Excel file and dynamically update it. So keep that in mind. It is a nice one-time backup from the first time you build it, but it's not going to incrementally add or change or modify it along the way. So we're getting close to a live demo. So let's talk about what might be coming soon, a part of the demo. So we talked about the gallery, so let's talk about, we saw the cube designer. We're going to want to actually build the cube. So you could do all of this really from the templates you saw in the gallery. So the gallery is within the cube designer extension, but you could actually go online to the utilities where the files are and those templates, use the sample basic Excel workbook, and just deploy it. So literally, you could log into OAC and within 5 minutes build your cube and be off and running. So you could, in theory, build a cube in 5 minutes in OAC. So the question I've got is, how fast can we, as a group here, build a cube? I'm almost kind of curious if I have any thoughts of how fast. All right, shy crowd, it's okay. Before we get there, so we'll tease a little bit because I want to make sure that all of the emotions come out. So this was a fun error that I found in Cube Designer. Cube Designer, I was a little disgusted. I was a little sad. I was almost kind of angry, like, why is SmartView yelling at me? I'm an evangelist. I really love SmartView. I like using it. Why is it yelling at me? The sheet's empty. So you'll see this because the sheet was empty. I tried to hit I was trying to break it, so in all due respect, I was trying to break it, and I was pressing all the different buttons, and this was one of the messages that came up. But the sheet was actually empty, so I went to actually go deploy the cube. The sheet was empty, the book was empty, and it's actually trying to be interactive with you to give you some helpful hints of what to do or what not to do. So, bear with me 1 second. I got a laugh on that one. All right, so I needed to make sure that I navigated back. So this is going to be our live demo. If you have your phone or you have a stopwatch or you have an old school egg timer. I don't know how many people brought those. You'll get to see in our live demo a cube being built. So you saw that I'm opening Excel, I'm going into the cube designer, I'm going in and pressing the cube designer, it's opening up the wizard. So you'll see that I'm not building a very logical cube, I'm literally trying to build a cube as fast as I can. I'm giving it the application name, the cube name, and I'm giving it a few different dimensions. I type them in, I think I spelled some stuff wrong along the way. Going into, I want to pick the alias, I want to make sure that I'm going to do it as an ASO cube. So I'm actually going in, it may not have been the fastest way to do it because I'm actually going in, typing things in, checking buttons here and there. And I'm going through, I don't need data, I don't need calc. Like we said, those are only optional, it's not required. I'm actually going now to the worksheet. It's actually putting in the worksheets along the workbook. I need to make sure that I have the active connection that I want to get connected to in my environment. I clicked on Build Cube. I now actually have to log in, so I'm putting in my credentials. Ignore that, that's meaningless for everybody. Put that in, I sign in, and it's actually, you can see my little Windows cursor is thinking. I do want to build a cube. I don't have data, that's okay. Let's go ahead and deploy it. It tells me that the job was submitted, and I get to go log into the web. You can see all my little favorites across the workbook, and then you can see that the test app that I created is actually there. And I validated, I went into the outline, I saw that dimensions were actually created. You can see that there's nothing in there, so you can see all this little naming convention there. C is for children and descendants and levels. There's nothing there, just the dimensions, but the cube is built. So I know I was talking very, very fast, slightly on purpose, because I only had 1 minute and 32 seconds to explain what it was doing. So like I was saying before, if you were to get OAC, you log in, you could, in theory, build a cube in less than 5 minutes. One that has a little bit more meaning, it would be sample basic. But this is really kind of the speed of building a cube. You could build a cube that fast in the sense of, do you have everything properly laid out in the workbook? You have the dimensions that you want, you have the hierarchy structures. It's as simple as going to a button in your Excel ribbon and pressing it and hitting build a cube and deploy it. So for me, this was pretty cool. I thought this was great. Any questions so far? Okay. All right, so in building the cube, there were a number of different warnings and errors that I encountered, either good ones that I was expecting or not so good ones that I wasn't expecting. So let's talk a little bit about what those are. So a part of what you saw in the cube being built was that the job was submitted to go and build and deploy the cube. So this is one of those warnings that said that the job was imported. It was from Excel. And do I want to take a look at the status of that job and what this warning is? So the answer is yes. So the next thing that you do is you go into that job viewer. You can see the job ID. You can see the type of job. It was imported from Excel. You can see there was no data file. That was the script that was used to be able to load it up. The server that it was on, let's ignore that. And the cube, the application, when it started, and the elapsed time. The beautiful part is that you have the ability on that one to hit details, and now you could see more of the detail of that specific job you were looking at. And now it shows you another window. So this is actually all in Excel. I didn't even have to navigate out to the web. I built up my cube in my workbook. I hit deploy. The job actually got submitted. I now can actually see all of this just from one user experience, never having to go anywhere else. So I'm now seeing the details of this, and it's showing me what kind of job type it is, but now it's showing me that it completed with warnings and what those were down below. So it showed me that some of those dimensions built successfully, some actually had a warning. And then the other thing that is maybe a little hard to see, we'll jump it up a little bit, is that it actually brings the error files here for you. You don't have to try to go dig and search and figure out where those are. And so now I wanted to see the detail of that specific warning. It's actually really easily viewable in just a flat notepad, text pad, notepad, and I can see, oh well, the 19,626th record there's an error in associating that player to a specific weight. So I was going to actually try to build it as lean as I could because I had over 19,000 players that were in this cube. I didn't put all of the weights from 0 to 500. I put in the actual weights of people that were in Major League Baseball. So I didn't have 239 pounds, that specific weight, which is why it gave me this error. All right, so a little bit of humor on my part. Hopefully you'll enjoy this as much as I do. The connection in SmartView. So along the way, we were told that private connections were dead, that we were only supposed to use shared connections, they were more secure, so I was a little bit humored with the fact that now with OAC, your connection type has to be a private connection, and you provide it the URL, and you set up your connection in that fashion. So for me, I was always kind of under this mindset that it's someday, some way, somehow, that the private connection would go away, but it looks like it's coming back. But in all fairness, it's coming back for real good reason. So you're going in, you're creating a private connection, you're creating a new connection, you're telling it that it is the SmartView HTTP provider connection type, and then you're actually going to pass it this specific URL syntax. HTTP, the host, so that IP, all those gobbledygook numbers with the dots in between, /Essbase/SmartView. Another little joke is that URL has been changing over time, so depending on what version, just be careful that this is the one that you want and the syntax you want for OAC. So some of them say like SmartView's providers and workspace and all kinds of other stuff. So just keep that in mind. If you're familiar with that as your URL, this is the URL that you want to have. So let's talk about some of the other tools that are a part of Cube Builder. So you have a formula editor, you have view hierarchy, you have the gallery we talked about, you have the ability to analyze data. So let's talk a little bit more in detail on some of these. So viewing a hierarchy. So this is where you still don't have to navigate anywhere away from that Excel workbook. You could stay right within that same user experience in the workbook and see your hierarchy in a tree view. I don't know how many users that I've had come to me and say, you told me my hierarchies on DRM and I don't know what they look like. This is a beautiful way to do it. And the actual beautiful part about this is, if you were to download the Cube Designer extension and have it installed for whoever that user is, they don't even have to connect to anything. All the things that we saw going through that workbook and that wizard, I wasn't connected to anything. That was offline in an Excel workbook, building it out independently on my own. I could have been in a cave without Wi-Fi, and it still works because you're just going through the wizard, answering the quick questions. The same thing for this. This is one of the tools within the Cube Designer extension that you could hand to a user and say, this is what the GUI version of your hierarchy looks like. This is the structure, interact with it, it's in a tree view. They're pretty familiar with this because it looks like kind of their Windows tree structures. They click and navigate through that. And then you can see here, it's going to show you the member name and the alias and the consolidation operator. And maybe at some point they enhance that to show UDAs or other type properties, a part of the dimension. So let's talk about fun fact number one. So fun fact number one is that OAC requires and builds cubes in Unicode mode. Does anyone care? Yeah? Okay. Anyone know what Unicode mode is for or why? Yeah? Okay. It's for all those wonderful, fun characters and languages and, fun fact two, emojis. So the fun fact about being able to build in Unicode mode is that you can use emojis. We'll get to see that because in my case, I used the baseball emoji. I actually wanted to try it out because for me, I had not used Unicode mode really since I was told that it was available. And going back to the saying that I'm the SmartView guy, I really like SmartView, it's because Unicode mode didn't work in the add-in. The classic add-in didn't support Unicode mode. So it almost kind of forced me to go to SmartView. And now I actually have kind of a use case to use this. And so it may be hard to see, But the actual measures dimension, the alias I have for the measures dimension is the emoji baseball. And so it's actually kind of fun to say that, all of that is related to all the measures are for baseball, and now I can actually see that. It actually comes through when you refresh. So the actual baseball comes through in the cell in SmartView. There are more practical use cases for emojis. So in theory, you could have, a text list type of a, thumbs up or thumbs down, or a traffic lighting, or, there's a number of other real life practical use cases. I know this one might be a little fictitious in a sense, but there are actual, relatable use cases for why emojis may be something you could put in there. All right, so let's talk about the formula editor. I know I've seen a number of different sessions along the way here at Kscope talking about the formula editor in one way or another. This is really just kind of a flat text editor. It does provide you with a list of functions. It shows you the operators. And then the only thing you have to keep in mind here is that it doesn't validate ASO formulas. But the beautiful thing is that you can actually create your formula with this editor, and it actually send it back. It'll try to do some, validation for you, a part of the formula, whether it's got proper syntaxing, and then away you go, and it puts it into that cell within the workbook to create the formula for you. Okay. The other thing to note about formulas in the Cube Designer is that you don't have to use this. This isn't a requirement either. If you really wanted to just go into the Excel formula bar and just start typing in your formula or just typing it in cell, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Just ensure that you have the right syntax to do that. Okay. Can you say that a little louder, please?
If you want to validate the formula, we should do it from the web view.
So the question was, if I want to validate the formula, should I do that from the web view? So my suggestion would be that there's nothing wrong with you validating it from here. The behavior here should act the same as on the web. For ASO cubes, we could probably take that question after the session. I know that there's some of the Oracle people that are here in the room actually. They might be able to more specifically answer that to the actual version number and things like that. Is that okay? Okay. All right. All right, so let's get to some of the other things talking about. So to this point, I feel comfortable that if you were to have OAC, you should be able to build a cube in 5 minutes or less. We've gone through the wizard, we've gone through the tabs, we've talked about all the different functionality, what's there, what's available, the starter templates there for you. We've talked about some of the neat things and some of the gotchas as well along the way. So let's talk about the data visualization and a little bit of business intelligence. So in connecting your data, so this is a case where we had OAC and we had a pod. Pod is just a fancy term for two things together, like peas. We had Essbase and data visualization. Some people appreciate my humor, that's good. When you're in there, I think the stat I saw was over 40. I thought I saw over 50, and I think it depends on whether you are on the web or you're on the desktop version, whether you're on the Windows desktop or the Mac version. Let's just call it over 50 and we'll be good with that. The nice thing to note there is that there's Oracle and non-Oracle connection types, which is great. So I know we all love Oracle, but there are times where we need to connect to things that aren't necessarily Oracle. The other thing to note there is we have ODBC and JDBC connection types, or if you really got desperate, you could just load a file. I've done it, I'm guilty. All right, so these are some of the connection types that we're talking about. And I believe we've taken the beta off of Oracle Essbase now at this point. In preparation for my presentation, it was in beta at that point. But we could connect to Oracle, to Amazon, to Google, to unstructured data in big data types. We could connect to the cloud and many more. So let's talk about OAC and the DV side and some of the custom plugins that we saw in the very early part of the presentation and how those came to be. So I did go out to the Oracle Analytics library. You can Google search it, it's pretty easy, or you could use this URL to get to it and navigate. And you want to, a part of setting up any of the custom plugins, you'd go out to the library, you'd find the plugin that you want, you'd download it. It's a zip file, so it should be harmless. You take the zip file and you navigate when you're in OAC. You're going to want to navigate to the console. You've downloaded the zip file, and it's literally as simple as dragging and dropping the zip file into the browser. It says drag file here, or click browse. So you can drag it in, which is the easiest method, or if you felt you wanted to go and have a few more mouse clicks, you could click that, find the file, and then it'll load in. Doesn't take more than a matter of seconds, hopefully, to load in, and there you go. So now you're ready to use the plugin, but we need to set up a few things. If you wanted to use the plugin to connect to the Essbase OAC part of this, so you could, in theory, build all of your visualizations in DV, use the custom plugins. You wouldn't have to necessarily connect to Essbase. But if you had a pod that had both of those and you wanted to connect the Essbase part of it to the DV and you wanted them to know and be intelligent about knowing each other, this is what you would do. So the key is you need 2 access rules, 2 and only 2. You need the 2 access rules, and this is the steps, the procedure that you would need to follow in order to do that. I've made it easy because we went through trying to figure this out. You go into My Services in your actual OAC console. In your Services console, you go into the actual service itself for OAC. You open the action menu. So the action menu, I've heard a number of different things. It's the hamburger. It's a little springboard. It's the 3 lines stacked on top of each other. You click on your Essbase service name, so whatever you've created and called your Essbase service name, and then you need to go in and add these 2 rules. And so the 2 rules that you need to add, one is an agent, and the second is a server. The agent, you're going to want to set it up as a public internet source. The destination is your BI analytics server or service, whatever you've got there. And then this is the actual port, 1423. TCP protocol, and it's a rule type as a user. The second one is the server. So I've seen a few different things, a part of the port numbering, but I would suggest a part of our service success counselor from Oracle. She suggested that 32,000 to 34,000 is an acceptable range, and that should work. And again, it's TCP and user type. Yes, Victor? All right, beautiful. Updating slides on the fly, I like it. So now is this just default and native and you don't have to set this up?
All HTTP, you don't need to open any ports, everything is good.
Beautiful, I love it. All right. Data visualization in SmartView, so this might be a shorter conversation. So how do you see your visualizations in SmartView? So the answer is you don't. You can if you actually go into the data visualization and there's this little button that says Open Classic Home, ... Open Classic Home, if you have the BI service, will actually take you to kind of that, quote, old school OBIEE where you go and you create, you got the folders and you drag stuff in, and the old way that you'd build it in like that OBIEE report creator. Then you'd be able to use the create an Oracle BIE connection, which the name just blows my mind. And that's the port analysis JBIPs that you need, a part of the syntax for that URL. You're going to actually use that, and you're going to pull in the OBIEE designer created reports. So what I've kindly asked, a part of, hey, Oracle, we're creating all these awesome visualizations. We saw some of those earlier on. Can I get those in via SmartView, in Excel or PowerPoint or wherever those may be? Because I know that I've got executives that like pretty pictures. They might not even know or care what the numbers or words are. They just like seeing the picture and they're done for the meeting. But this is the BI section of it, and it's a little bit lighter because the way that you're pulling in some of these a lot of times is just the table or just a pivot report or so it's a little bit less to be desired on the visualization coming via SmartView. But the nice part about the visualization in DV, those are very rich visualizations. And you do have the ability there, so I do want to defend it a little bit to, you have the ability there to create as a PDF, export it, On some of these you'll see coming up here. So I was a little sad. These ones I actually just copy and pasted. It just took a screen grab and put all the just beautiful visualizations that are in there. Some of these are native ones to the DV. Some of these are custom plugins. So this is a tree map, an actual map of data. Some of the things that I needed to be able to set up, and Victor may correct me if this doesn't need to be done anymore, but you needed to make sure that some of this was set up as a safe domain. And you needed to have the custom plugins set up that way. One of them I specifically knew about was the Essbase writeback, which was a custom plugin that got deployed, which I thought was really, really neat. The ability to just go online in a web grid style and submit data back to Essbase. So in theory, the user didn't necessarily need to have SmartView in a Windows client. They could go up onto the web, change their number, and submit it, and it would work. This one, you actually had to create a safe domain. And it's a little hard to see here, but that is a wildcard. So the actual domain name is a wildcard, and you check all the boxes. So it should be that simple. I know that we got talked and told a part of the symposium that some of this may be changing over the course of time. But this for me was a really great feature to see that this type of capability is available, and we have the ability to build off of it. All right, so we're nearing the end of time. So what I would suggest is please fill out your evaluations. Hopefully you had a great time in here and you learned something a part of being able to get into OAC, build a cube yourself from scratch, feel comfortable doing that, and some of the capabilities on the visualization side, how to set that up, how to have the pod talk within itself. I know that's changed now recently, but yes, question? What's the cost for all the extensions? I'm not from Oracle and I can't talk to the licensing and the cost. I would suggest if you wanted, we have some people from Oracle that are here, if you wanted to go down the booth, that would be my best suggestion for you. Yeah.
The assumption that you guys will develop the extensions, so this question to you, how much it costs to use it?
I think there was one here and we'll come back. Yep.
That's not the case every time, right? Like I'm loading 10,000 measures data, I'm going to have it across the rows instead. So is the format fixed for that? Or?
I believe that the format is fixed where you have to have that across the column headers. I don't know if, I'd say you could probably submit an ER, an enhancement request, and ask for that. I think if you do have a valid use case, I don't think there'd be anything wrong to have a discussion with the product management team and see what their thoughts are on that. On some of this, there may be some intelligent reason of why they wanted it that way. Maybe part of sending it up online, that format is better because it can, but I don't think there's anything wrong with you talking with them about it. Oh, are you okay if we? All right, go ahead. Yep.
How do you secure the cube?
How do I secure the cube? So for us, because we were using it on a trial basis, we provisioned everyone as an admin who was going to get access to it. You do have the ability to go into the provisioning by user and set it up that way.
I can answer this.
Yep.
So filters are there, roles are there, pretty much whatever you have in on-prem is there. It's not through Cube Designer though. You need to go to web interface.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah.
I've seen demo of Power BI, I don't know how it functions. How would you compare this to that? What is the advantage of it?
So The short answer so the question was, how does this compare to Power BI? I think the short answer that I give would be that Power BI is very Microsoft-ish. So it's going to look and feel like Microsoft, and to me, it's really not a very intelligent tool because it's only going to look and see and recognize Microsoft-ish type things. So you're not going to be able to see Essbase. You're not going to be able to see, your Hyperion environment in that sense. I don't know. Does that help? Okay.
Yeah, for Power BI, they don't have enough, most of the analytical, for Essbase, they don't have enough planning, so most of the article, EPM side of that, they are not ready yet.
Yeah.
We already have Power BI, but I don't think we are using it now.
Yeah, so the other answer in the room was it doesn't have some of those native adapters. I think the thing to think about for Power BI, it's not going to natively, naturally recognize hierarchy or hierarchical structure. So you're going to have to try to figure out a way to do that on your own. Whereas these just natively, naturally pick up, you have a dimension with a hierarchy, and that's just how it's supposed to behave and operate. Yeah.
I'm just going to add that we use Power BI as well, and we have to do a lot of custom coding to mimic a hierarchy type feeling.
Yeah.
Power BI, it's a lot of man-hours.
Yeah, so the other answer was, they have Power BI. They've had to do a lot of manual work in coding and really kind of configuration. A lot of man hours was the comment to be able to get that to work. All right, any more questions?
From our live streaming audience, Paul says, what do you see as the biggest challenge moving an Essbase on-prem to OAC?
So what I would say to Paul would be, I have a feeling I know who this Paul may be. What I would say to Paul would be the biggest challenge that I see would be in an environment that we've got at GE, the cubes and the apps that we have are very large in nature. So we have cubes that are 22 dimensions with 4 attributes, with 2 or 3 or 4 of those dimensions, with hundreds of thousands of members and hierarchy structure that are in them. For me, I wanted to build this cube, and I know it might be a little bit kind of a comical example of, baseball, but I wanted to actually take a cube with some sort of size to it. As you saw, it has every player in baseball history, over 19,000 people. I wanted to make sure that if I'm going to build a cube with maybe not necessarily GE size and scale, but at least with bigger than sample basic, that I could do it, and I proved it that I could. So I think that's a little bit of the concern that I have is just, I haven't gotten there yet. I'd like to be able to get there, and will it be able to properly, actively support that kind of a cube in that size and shape, in OAC. Other questions from online or in the room? Yes.
It's a simple question, but you said HTTP, but I assume it also supports HTTPS, image SSL, and it's the same thing you guys are delivering it through that too, right?
Yeah, we just, interchange, but HTTPS.
Yeah, so the question was HTTP, but does it support S? And the answer was yes, HTTP and HTTPS. Any other questions? So I think we're right up on the time, and what I'd do is I'd say thank you for staying a few minutes extra. I appreciate it. If you have any other questions, please come up and talk to me. If you're shy, you can send me an email. Any form is appreciated, so thank you.